I'm Rachel Edidin.
And I'm Miles Stokes.
And we are the hosts of Rachel and Miles Explain the X-Men, a weekly podcast where we walk listeners through the ins, outs, and retcons of our very favorite superhero soap opera.
We're also the co-hosts of Rachel and Miles Review the X-Men,
which you're watching right now,
where we talk about the X-books that come out every week.
So this week we're looking at the books that came out on March 18th, 2015, of which there are 6, including crossovers.
Mm-hmm. And Rachel, I have to ask, so that's, those are interesting. Is this a Cyclops thing?
What? No. So Cyclops' visor clearly has a red lens. These, I feel like this should be evident, and I'm a little worried that you didn't know this, are obviously like generic 80s cyberpunk villain sunglasses, which your father got me, incidentally. Thank you, Steve.
This is family. This is what family's about.
I feel like it sounds like the start of a tawdry joke, but it's really not. They were a Christmas present. He knows I like weird sunglasses.
That's the whole thing. Anyway, let's talk about some comics.
First up, we've got All New X-Men number 39, Chapter 5 of The Black Vortex, written by Brian Michael Bendis, drawn by Andrea Sorrentino, and colored by Marcello Maiolo. I am not getting into this event. It's cool. In particular, I'm not getting into this event in context of this book because the new X-Men, the time-displaced original 5, just feel like a really shoehorned fit for it.
Yeah, I think it made a lot more sense in the trial of Jean Grey. I mean, you had the characters who all had reasons to be there. With this time, they just sort of happened to be in space. I mean, with the exception of getting to meet up with Cyclops again, which I gotta say, I'm really loving. It's been months and months and months, and it's good to see those characters together again.
Well, and it's good to see how the characters have changed in each other's absence and how that affects their dynamic now that they're back together. I have mixed feelings about Sorrentino's art. It's very pretty. I don't think it's storytelling on the level that I'd like it to be. And the colors are confusing for me. I know Jean Grey is super pale, but when you have a Red Hood who's actually colored light blue,
it's
there's
space. Space is blue.
Mystique is blue. Mystique is a blue-skinned redhead, for instance. And there are specific visual cues in an X-Men book that sets off, and it's confusing. And in general, again, I feel like the attractiveness in the art and the quality of the art relative to the quality of the art as comics isn't quite where I'd like it to be. Again, Sorrentino does beautiful stuff. It's just not quite there for me.
Mm-hmm. So we'll go straight into Guardians Team Up number 3, which is Chapter 6 of the Black Vortex. This is written by Sam Humphries with art by Mike Mayhew and colors by Rain Barreto. And yes, they had 2 parts of the Black Vortex come out in the same week because scheduling. Why not? I think I like this part a little bit better than the last part. It's definitely a stark contrast. The art is very sort of traditional, comic booky, cartoony, clean lines as compared to Sorrentino's in the all-new X-Men issue.
Well, and it's also not an X-Men story. It's a Ronan the Accuser story in which a couple X-Men appear.
Yeah, now if you've only seen the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, you might be a little confused because Ronan was a total bad dude in that, and in this he's much more nuanced. That's how he's been in comics for a while.
So bad dude like villain, not like bad dude as in enough to save the president.
I bet he could save the president. I guess the president's daughter, actually.
What if he accused the president?
He could accuse his parents, but that would just be a Mystery Science episode.
But
we digress.
Yeah, just a little.
So anyway, I think between the last chapter and this one, it is finally starting to sell the stakes of this story. The good guys are all split up into various teams to do various things, and we see Beast, the older Beast, who has, turned into a super Black Vortex guy, building a replica of space-time to figure out how to enact these super characters' plans. And I gotta say, if you want to sell how powerful a character is, have them build a replica of space-time. That seems to work pretty well.
I mean, this is a guy who has been, sticking his dick in the space-time continuum pretty regularly for a long time anyway.
That's a good way of phrasing it.
I mean, not super literally. Maybe, I mean, in the sense that he's traveled in time, I guess technically literally.
Who knows what happens between panels. But yeah, I will say, and this is something you brought up when we were talking earlier, this still doesn't feel like an X-Men story at all. The X-Men are they're just kind of there. Trial of Jean Grey made a lot more sense for the X-Men and the Guardians to be hanging out. This, not so much so far. I don't know, we'll see how that goes. But I gotta say, it's at least more entertaining than it started off, and I gotta give it props for that.
Next up, we've got Magneto number 16, written by Cullen Bunn, drawn by Gabriel Hernandez Walta, and colored by Jordi Belair. And I also want to give a shout out this week in particular to cover artist David Yarden, who has done just a beautiful job. And man, I like this book, and I feel like we keep on saying the same things about it every week, which is that it's a really good, really interesting book. It's very different from anything else in the X line right now. It's not really a superhero book. It's more of a not quite traditional, but moving definitely actively in that direction at the end of this particular issue noir story, and while Bunn and Walter are doing great jobs, Belair is absolutely the standout talent on it.
Mm-hmm. One thing I like about where the plot's going right now, we see Magneto sort of running what's left of Genosha, bringing mutants there, like various refugees and escapees, to give them a safe haven.
Well, and mutants who've been brought there because Red Skull had
right. The whole Red Skull thing in Axis. And yet, actually, it reminds me a little bit of in Ultimate Comics X-Men not too long ago when Kitty Pryde was starting the sort of reservation of Utopia, bringing all the mutants there as a haven. And I really like that story, so it's nice to see a 616 semi-equivalent.
You know, I see it very, very differently.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I saw that Utopia as a very direct build off the Utopia that came out of the Dark Reign stuff. This Genosha, and the important difference is that arc is very much about Kitty being, I mean, a teenager or a very young adult who is trying to start a utopia with that brash idealism.
Mm-hmm.
This is a Magneto who has been through a lot and who has led this nation previously and who is finding and redefining himself very late in his life at this point. And that changes the story significantly and I think makes it interesting for very different reasons.
It's also, of course, much darker in tone, as dark as Ultimate Comics X-Men was. We see, you know, a murder committed by, as near as we can tell, Nazis. Like, okay, when your protagonist is a villain, how do you make the villain seem really bad? You make them Nazis. Nobody's worse than Nazis.
You know, Magneto isn't a villain. I mean, he's a super villain in that sense, but he is an anti-hero pretty solidly at this point, and he has been for a very long time. I think describing Magneto as a villain in context of the X-Line hasn't been a descriptor that's been applicable since, God, maybe like Grant Morrison.
Maybe, yeah. And don't forget, that wasn't Magneto, that was Zorn, or was it? It was very confusing.
Vampires pretending to be people, pretending to be vampires. How avant-garde!
Exactly. But yeah, this title continues to be excellent, and it looks like it's going to be continuing through Secret Wars, at least with a Last Days thing. I hope once Secret Wars is done that this book still exists in some form. It is stellar. Next is Wolverines number 11, written by Charles Soule, with art by Ariella Cristantina and colors by Sonia Obak. So this sort of follows the last couple of issues as the newly very superpowered Fang, who used to be just the dude who Wolverine stole the clothes of in space.
Although they do reference that in this issue, finally, which I appreciated.
They do, it's true. This time he's taking X-23, Laura Kinney, out on sort of an adventure where he's been getting into everyone's head previously. And the difference, of course, is that Laura is the only one of the characters in this book who could really be considered a full-on superhero.
Now, when Miles says adventures, he actually means heavy-handed moral lessons and fables that all end with essentially the moral, you're a bad person and you should feel bad. Fang was Wolverine's bro, and nominally this is his quest to basically just mess with everyone who Wolverine didn't like since he's discovered that they're all in the same place.
Yeah. So with Laura, the lesson, as it were, is basically Fang saying, well, I was cloned after I died, and you're a clone, and we can be our own people, and we can choose to be what we are. So it's not the deepest thing in the world. It is still a little heartwarming, though, I have to say.
Yeah, but the metaphor makes absolutely no sense, because Fang is a clone from... Fang's basically a backup copy of himself. Like, he died, and his memories remained intact in a cloned version of his body. Laura is aware that she is a separate person from Wolverine. There's never really been any question of that. The question has been more about her agency as like a lab-grown and trained killer.
Mm-hmm. And so they do address that a bit, but yeah, I think it's weaker than the last couple of issues. It's less interesting. We also have some stuff with Phantom Al stealing random Wolverine crap for some reason again, and Ogun and Shogun having a battle over his body with Deathstrike in the middle. You know, stuff. So, overall, the series has been fun. This issue is fine. I don't think it's as strong as the ones that have come before.
I really like Cristantina's art. I will say that. I think it's very strong. I think it's a very good fit for the book. And I think the line art and the colors work beautifully together. Next up is Cyclops number 11. This is written by John Layman, drawn by Javier Garrón, colored by Chris Sotomayor, and it is, for all practical purposes, the last issue of this series. There is technically one more, but it's a Black Vortex crossover, so... You know, this is the end of the Cyclops Zola series.
It's a weird way to end a series, I have to say.
It's been a weird final arc of the series in general. For some context, for those of you who haven't been following along with these from the start or heard me rave about them extensively online, this started out as a book by Greg Rucka, Russell Dodderman, and Chris Sotomayor, who's been the one consistent member of the creative team throughout. Rucka's arc, Dodderman left after the third issue to draw Thor, which he's been doing beautifully, was amazing. It's one of my favorite arcs of any comic, not just any X book. It is the only X book we've ever gotten a page from. And then Layman took over, and Garone. And Garone is great. And he's drawing in a style that fits the story that Layman is telling, which is a story that to me doesn't fit the book or the character much at all.
Yeah, it's just sort of, it's a space pirate story, and it's a fun space pirate story, but as we've mentioned before, it's not necessarily a Cyclops story, or a Corsair story for that matter.
Right, and it's one that's been very reliant on Deus Ex Machina. That's probably not the right plural. Sorry, deal. And one that just for me doesn't justify the existence of a solo book around its main character.
Mm-hmm.
It misses the point and misses the point and continues to miss the point through issue 11, which is okay. It features a character who I really liked, who was introduced in this book, kind of flattened into a two-dimensional stereotypical mad, spurned not even lover going, "Daddy, he hurt my feelings, kill him."
Yeah, that was a really unfortunate plot element to have happen to Velina, who is a character who previously was actually really interesting. One of the more interesting elements of the book, I think.
Yeah, agreed. And on one hand, I'm sorry to see this book go because of what it was. On the other hand, it's been very little beyond frustrating to watch it continue to be what it became.
Finally, we have Storm number 9, written by Greg Pak, with art by Al Barrionuevo and Neil Edwards, and Tom Palmer and Ed Taddeo, and colors by Ruth Redmond. That's a lot of artists. Anyway, this is a new story after the recent sort of Senator Airplane fugitive arc, which is a really strange way to describe it now that I think about it. But this one was really fun, I thought. In this one, Gambit brings Storm along to a heist. He's trying to get into this temple that has a thiefy artifact, and one of his Thieves Guild general guys is trying to stage a coup and take it.
It's the guy who was the villain in X Factor, right?
Yeah, he was a technopath, which is a rad power.
Yeah.
But yeah, it involves Gambit recruiting Storm because she's an old school thief. She can do these things without technology, and since they're up against a technopath, that makes sense. And it's just a fun, like, Hidden Temple, Raiders of the Lost Ark kind of heist thing.
Yeah, so I read the ending first, and I was like, I cannot believe, I'm not going to spoil it, but I could not believe that Pack had actually done that.
Uh-huh.
But I also kind of loved it. Like, it's a ridiculous twist, and it's a ridiculous and vaguely, like, wouldn't it be funny if, and then he does it?
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of love it.
Yeah, and so, I mean, this series has been all about the different sides of Storm, the different facets of her as woman, goddess, thief, protector, etc. And so seeing her as a sneaky thief is great. The last time we saw something like this was actually in a Curse of the Mutants spin-off a while back, written by Cy Spurrier. It was Gambit and Storm having to break into Vampire Island, which is the best premise ever.
To steal Dracula's severed head, right?
Or body.
Or no, not his
which.
head, because his head was in Atlantis.
Like you do.
Curse of the Mutants, you're amazing.
But it's fun to see that, and it's not all just super lighthearted. There's some narration by Beast talking to another character in the background that's really bringing up some of the symbolism of what's going on as far as being on the front lines versus being a leader versus what you're running away from by doing either. But it's a solidly enjoyable issue.
Yeah, the art is serviceable. I was not super impressed with it this issue, but honestly, with this issue, the writing is what you're in it for anyway.
Yeah. It looks like, the Marvel Universe is ending in Secret Wars. This series was confirmed a couple days ago to be at least briefly ending during that. I'm going to miss it, but it'll have had a great, great run. So there you go. Rachel, what's our pick of the week?
I think our pick of the week this week is going to have to be Magneto number 16. It's a beautiful issue. It's taking the series in a really interesting direction. And it's just a really nice showcase of everything I love about this particular creative team.
Mm-hmm. Completely agree. Writing, art, colors, all glorious this time around.
And characterization. And so that's, simple, patent, dry, beautiful. What is our panel of the week? I had a lot of trouble nailing that down for myself, but you came up with, I think, a really, really solid one.
Yeah, so this is a panel from Wolverines number 11, and okay, so again, I'm a fan of good comic timing in panels, and look at that. I mean, it's horribly gruesome, of course, but it's also something I've really wondered about. Like, okay, if Wolverine's claws are in his forearms, doesn't he have to have his hands in, like, the exact right position, or it gets terrible? So, yes.
And the answer is apparently yes. Yes, he does.
Yes, indeed. If Wolverine gets drunk in very complicated circumstances, he might, as he say, snicked himself.
I feel like a lot of the issue is also an answer to the no price, the reader question, what does it take to get Wolverine drunk?
Yes, and as it turns out, science-y stuff.
Heroic
and alien
measures.
Stuff. Exactly.
And, so that's our official panel of the week. But there's another panel I want to take a moment and, mention as an honorable mention. It is not from an X book. It is from Captain America and the Mighty Avengers #6. And I'm picking this out not for the plot relevance, not for the art, not for the writing, but for the fact that it at long last absolutely confirms what may be the most important detail of Marvel canon of all time.
It's official.
Well done, Al Ewing.
So we're all done for this week, and next time I think we're going to be recording from Seattle, right?
We are. We are going to be up there for Emerald City Comic Con, and if you are going to be there and you're free Saturday at 7, you should come to the Rachel and Miles Explain the X-Men meetup. It is happening in the Convention Center, 7 o'clock Saturday night, and we will be posting details on the web at rachelandmiles.com.
Speaking of rachelandmiles.com,
if you like what you've seen here, please check out our podcast, Rachel and Miles Explain the X-Men. New episodes go up every Sunday at rachelandmiles.com, on iTunes and on Stitcher. What have we got going on this week?
So this week we are covering the origin of probably my favorite single X-Men character, that being Longshot. We're doing the miniseries written by Ann Nesenti with art by Arthur Adams. And guys, it's so mullety. There's mullets and demons and Doctor Strange, and it's great.
And the patient zero of the 90s.
Yeah.
What you see here in the video reviews, everything on our website, the apartment we're filming from, is brought to you thanks to our amazing Patreon supporters. You guys rock. If you want to join their ranks, which we would love, you can do that at the link below us or at the top of the website if you're watching this at rachelandmiles.com.
Yes, Patreon supporters, you guys are rad. Meanwhile, we will see some, ideally all of you, in Seattle.
I'm still bummed that I didn't get to make an H.H. Monroe reference.
Throw it in the outtakes.